We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. The number is 737-7587. It's Clint Kelly. He's an attorney, specializes in malpractice. If you want to join in the conversation, questions about cases, let's get to Joe. Yeah, it's nice to hear from him. He always watches and calls. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick and
Hey.
Mr. Kelly.
Joe.
First of all, I want to say thanks for Mr. Kelly coming on and giving his expert advice to these folks. You touched on it briefly a while ago. I want to add a little bit to it on the care of the prisoners. Most people don't know that you have the hospital for all of the state prisons right here in Nashville. It's the lowest of very special needs. They got an 800-bed unit there. They have cancer patients, mental patients, dialysis patients, and they get eye care, dental care, and they have, generally speaking, they get just as good a care, if not, than most of the average folks.
Well, what you're saying is they get care, and we all know there are people in society that get no care because they don't have insurance and can't afford it.
That's exactly right, and it's all, you know, they can set up appointments with the doctor and everything, and it's, you know, it's, I think, $3 or something like that for a doctor visit. But anyway, I just wanted to shout out to those folks out there because dealing with people in prison adds another thing to treat people, you know, rather than just the general public, because prisoners do some crazy things sometimes to themselves and to the staff. So I just want to shout out to those folks that run that place. And if they need an operation or it's something that they cannot handle there, they transfer them to a hospital in Nashville to get whatever care they need. So they get good care. It's good or better, like I say, than the general public is.
It's better than nothing.
Thanks, Mr. Kelly, for coming on and addressing those drugs especially. I would comment on the drug thing. When you look at a drug advertisement on TV, look at the side effects first, and then look at the drug.
Yeah, that's what I do, Joe. That's what I do.
You look at the back end of the commercial. That's a good place to start. And what Joe's mentioned is another reason why I think jail cases, malpractice cases, are tough. And I tend to avoid them is that for the very reasons he said, is they do typically get good care. They get care, period.
Right.
That's free to them, and it's just it's tough to make a case.
Yeah. Hey, that's another reason, folks, and it's a separate show for us here, but everyone these days wants to lock so many people. Throw them in jail.
Oh, yeah.
It costs money, not just feeding and giving them room and board, but they get sick. You've got someone who's stage 4 cancer, you're paying for a very expensive medical treatment. You need someone who's got heart bypass surgery, you know, they're wards of the state. You got to pay. You can't just let them die of a heart attack. You pay for it. So many people just lock them up, lock them up, lock them up. If they knew what they're paying for.
Hey, just lock them up and now pay more taxes.
Yes.
That's all you got to say. Lock them up and now pay some more taxes.
Yeah, but no one wants to pay more taxes. They all want to lock them all up and along those lines. But I mean, that's just a whole issue. There are people committing crimes sometimes. You hear it to get the medical care.
Yeah,
that's just insane. What are some of the most common cases you'll get? Is it back injury things, surgeries on that? Is it mostly surgeries, or what are you seeing these days as being the most common type of cases that come through your door?
The three most common cases I get are cases involving a misdiagnosis. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two is a surgical mistake of some kind or complication from the surgery that was not treated properly. And number three are blood clot cases.
Okay.
I think I've told you that.
Yeah, that's a biggie.
For whatever reason, we're seeing more and more blood clot cases where the hospitals haven't done enough to prevent it. And I would say number four, although it's a distant four, are medical battery cases, cases where patients had the wrong body part operated on, or there's been a case of mistaken identity. I don't know why, but there have been more and more of those cases as time goes on.
737-7587 is the number if you want to jump in. I want to ask you more about just that. And we've done story on one of those cases.
Right.
And you have a couple penny ones. So when you're talking about a surgery perhaps, give me an example of one or two of them. Then we can talk about the one we publicized with the mother and the baby, which is still pending. But what, like, they removed the wrong kidney? How bad does it get?
One example, I had a case a couple of years ago where a patient had the wrong ovary removed. where the doctor got confused on which ovary to take out. I had a case, or have a case, excuse me, it is still pending right now, with a patient who had, you reported on this, who was told that there was going to be one procedure on her breast and she had a different procedure. Also, of course, a lot of people know about the case I have about the baby who was a case of mistaken identity, where the doctor operated on the baby's tongue and got that baby mixed up with another one. I had a case a few years ago where a patient was supposed to have elbow surgery on the right arm, ended up having it on the left arm. There are all kinds of ways to prevent this. They actually have a name for it. It's called a timeout procedure, where you go through a series, like a checklist for an airplane. You go through a number of different questions.
Standard of care.
Yes, standard of care. You make sure you go through that so you've got the right patient, the right body part, the right equipment. But for whatever reason, shortcuts are taken, and whenever there's a shortcut, there's probably going to be a mistake.
Okay, now one of the things, in my opinion, that makes Clint such a good lawyer is that he'll settle if he has to, or if he can, and get a good settlement, but you're not afraid to litigate. And what I mean by litigate is taking it to the courtroom.
That's correct.
And there are lawyers out there that they're out to settle, and that's it. And sometimes when you settle all the time, you get less money than you could if you went to trial.
Yeah, there's some lawyers out there, they're just looking for a quick buck. It amazes me that I still have clients call me up who have called other lawyers, and the lawyer will say, well, I might be able to get you a quick check. There's no such thing as a quick check in medical negligence cases. There takes a lot of pick and shovel work to get the right amount of compensation. Anybody can try to get 10 cents on the dollar for their case if they can. My job is to get them as much money as I possibly can under the law, or else you're selling your client short.
All right. Now, the reason I brought that up is you mentioned the case in terms of the baby and the mother. And if ever, and sometimes Clint says some are more straightforward cases than others, and there's no denying or disputing the fact that the wrong baby was operated on. Again, it was the, what is it called, tongue-tied?
Right.
Where they went in and severed some of the tissue underneath the baby's tongue. Right. They thought it was too tight. Sometimes they do that with babies who need it. They did it to the wrong baby. Now, we don't know what it's going to affect him later, but hopefully the child's okay. Now, that's a no-brainer. They acknowledge that, but the reason this case has not been resolved and may go to trial is because, and it's unique, I guess, you're not just suing with regard to what happened to the child, but the mental suffering of the mother and what she went through with a newborn. And she's blaming herself and must feel awful about this, and it's not her fault.
Yeah, she had to get psychiatric care for it, because, you know, when you give birth, mothers know this, your hormones are completely out of whack. And so when something like this happens, it has a physical effect on the mother as well as a mental effect. This harmed mama more than it did the baby, in my judgment. And that's where we're having the battle. That's why the case probably will be tried, is we can't come to an agreement with the doctor about whether he's responsible for what happened to the mother's
would that be a jury trial?
Yes.
Okay, and that's interesting, because I know you've got your thoughts about juries. And in this case, if I was on the jury, when I hear about mental suffering, I really want to take a hard look at it. It's hard to get a real handle on what someone feels after something goes awry. But I think on this one, I have a lot of sympathy for the mother. You know, she's just delivered the hormones, she's in the hospital, and the baby comes back in with blood on the mouth, you know? I mean, that's traumatic. Sometimes there's other cases where it's outside and someone says, well, it really affected me mentally, and I do think, oh, they're just gold digging, you know? And I'm not saying that's the case with this mother. I think she, to me, if I'm on the jury, is going to say, what, you're saying that mother's in the hospital, the newborn, and comes back with blood in the mouth, and that's not traumatic? I mean, come on. What is the hospital saying?
Well, there are times, Nick, when you should try a case. There are cases, in my opinion, that a jury should hear, should make a decision, should make a public pronouncement on what they think. I mean, juries are a sample of the community. They set the community standards. And sometimes cases need to be tried so that the community will pass a judgment on something and perhaps make a change. This is one of those cases where I believe a jury should hear this case. I think a jury would be inclined to hear it fairly and decide whether or not they believe that the mother should be compensated, and hopefully with their verdict change the way this hospital does business, and in particular how this doctor does business when he goes about cutting tongues on a patient.
So Right, yeah, exactly. So much of what you do is, obviously for your client, but then hopefully, if it's proven that something was done wrong, it takes a step toward preventing it from ever happening again, and that's really the key.
And I've got another case, Nick, where I'm probably going to end up going to trial. It's another dead bang liability case where there was a foul up on the part of the hospital and the doctor. They're just not offering my client enough money.
That's basically what it comes down to. They're going to say, now don't they all have insurance companies that represent them? So the insurance company is going to say, okay, you screwed up here. Let's take a look. Based on what this is what we normally pay
Sure,
out.
the hospital's self-insured. They got plenty of money, and the doctor has an insurance company that pays. And so the question is, can you get the hospital and the doctor's insurance company to pay a fair price? If they're not going to pay a fair price to my client, I'm going to trial.
Take a break on that note. When we come back, final segment, lines open, 737-7587 if you want to jump in with a question for malpractice attorney Clint Kelly. We'll be right back.